Hi everyone, I'm going to play the computer on Lichess, level 5. So this level is rated 2000. Okay, so I have the white pieces. I'll play e4. Okay, knight f3. Okay, Phildor defense. Alright, so d4. It's the book move here, gaining space in the center. Okay, that's an unusual reply, knight f6. So that hits my e4 pawn. So I'm tempted to just develop with knight c3 to protect e4. Could also consider d takes e5. But then knight takes e4. E takes d6. Bishop takes d6. Now I want to hold my strong pawn on e4. So knight c3 also threatens d takes e5. You can play knight d7. So if I play knight c3, you can play knight b d7 to support e5. And then maybe bishop c4. So there are two ways to play the Phildor as black. You can either exchange the pawn, e takes d4, or you can try to hold onto your pawn on e5. Looks like black is holding onto his pawn, so I'm going to play knight c3. Okay, that's an unusual move. That is one way to defend e5. So now if I play d takes e5, he has d takes e5, and his e5 pawn is supported, and the queens won't get traded. But he did just block in his dark squared bishop. But that bishop often gets fianchettoed in the Phildor anyway. It seems like a perfectly playable move, queen e7. Okay, so let's see. Bishop c4 is a possibility. Getting ready to castle kingside. I don't want to resolve the tension. I don't want to play d takes e5 and then d takes e5. I could play bishop g5, pinning the knight and threatening knight to d5. But after bishop g5, he has c6, a typical move in this kind of position. c6 keeps my knight out, and it allows black to expand with b5. And so bishop g5, c6 kind of dissuades bishop c4 as well because b5 is coming. Might play a4 in response to c6 to counter b5. And a bishop on g5 can get driven away with h6, bishop h4, and g5. Although the bishop on g3 would be hitting his e5 pawn, which would need support unless he trades it off. But after bishop g3, you could play knight h5, winning the bishop pair. Okay, so I want to develop a bishop, either bishop c4 or bishop g5. Bishop c4 also has the threat of following up with knight g5, hitting the f7 square, in which case he could play bishop to e6, and I could play knight takes e6, winning the bishop pair. And then F takes e6, and then D takes e5, D takes e5, and he has double isolated pawns. But he does have an open F file. He'll castle. Okay, well, my light square bishop I think is going to c4 no matter what, so I'm going to play it. Okay, knight c6. I was thinking maybe c6 there, so he doesn't have the c6 and b5 plan anymore. So he is attacking d4. I have it defended twice. However, there is the threat, he has a threat of e takes d4, knight takes d4, and then my e4 pawn is loose. So I could castle to deal with that threat, because his king and queen are on the e file and I can get a rook to e1. So castling would deal with that threat. So castle, e takes d4, knight takes d4, and then knight takes e4 is impossible because knight takes e4, queen takes e4, rook e1 wins the queen. So other possible moves here besides castling are knight d5 and bishop g5. Well, and knight g5. I can't forget about the plan against f7. So if knight g5, two ways to defend f7. There's bishop e6 and there's knight d8. I'm happy if he retreats his knight to d8. If bishop e6, if bishop e6, I have a pawn fork. I have d5. So knight g5, bishop e6, d5, knight a5 hitting my bishop, and then I can consider either bishop b5 check, or I can take his bishop on e6, and then he takes my bishop. It's just a trade. I can play pawn takes f7, check, queen takes f7. Well, no, there's no queen takes f7. I have a knight on g5. That might be good. So let's look at that again. Knight g5, bishop e6, d5, knight a5, d takes e6, knight takes c4, and then e takes f7 check, and then king d8 or d7. My knight would get driven away off of g5 with h6, and then he can round up the f7 pawn. So that might not be that great. Let's look at knight g5, bishop e6, d5, knight a5, bishop b5 check. Well, that allows bishop back to d7, saving his bishop and blocking the check. Seems like I should be able to get something out of knight g5. I mean, he can always drop his knight back to d8 to protect f7, and then drive my knight away with h6. Maybe my bishop belongs on g5 instead. That threatens knight to d5. So bishop g5, he can't play bishop e6 without running into d5 again. So bishop g5, how does he stop knight d5? He can move the queen to d7 and block in his bishop. It's fine with me. So I think bishop g5, developing move, threatening knight to d5 looks good. I like that better than knight g5. We'll see what the engine thinks later. Okay, he takes my pawn. I did not consider that because now knight d5 allows queen takes e4 check. Okay, so a couple moves that come to mind are just knight takes d4 and also bishop takes f6. So if bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, then there is knight d5 threatening the queen and the c7 square, so the queen would go back to d8. And then I can take the pawn on d4. That gives up the bishop pair. Material is even. I have more space. It's not much there. So let's see, knight takes d4. Just holding the e4 pawn. So knight takes d4, queen takes d4. With a threat of knight d5 still in the air. Although then he does have bishop e6 after that. I no longer have the pawn fork pushing a pawn to d5. But maybe I can get the bishop pair and retain the space advantage. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to take d4. Looks safe. You can't take e4 with either piece. It does look safe. Okay. All right, he attacks my bishop, but that gives me time to play knight d5, actually, hitting his queen. So two candidate moves, knight d5 or bishop takes f6. I don't want to retreat the bishop and allow g5. So let's look at knight d5 first. Okay, he would have to move the queen. No, I don't have knight d5. He has e4 pawn. I have to remember that. My e4 pawn drops. Okay, so maybe bishop takes f6. Queen takes f6 allows knight d5. And then queen d8 to protect c7. Then maybe, no. Okay, I do get more space, but I've lost the bishop pair. Is there any other move besides bishop takes f6? There's knight takes c6. So knight takes c6, threatens the queen, forces b takes c6. The pawn on c6 is a good defender of the b5 and d5 squares. I don't want to play bishop h4 and face g5, bishop g3. And then knight takes e4 might be possible there. I think it is. So I have a little choice. I think I have to, because my e4 pawn is weak, I think I have to take on f6. So in the interest of time, I'm going to play that. Okay, he takes back with the g-pawn, ruining his pawn structure, but keeping the pressure on e4, which keeps my knight on c3 at home. Might be time to castle, but then there is rook g8. He has an open g-file. And there's also rook g8 followed by bishop h3. I might try to castle long here. I was thinking queen d3 to support the e4 pawn and castle long, but queen d3, knight b4. And where does my queen go? Then maybe queen f3. No, then c5 hits my knight on d4, it moves and he takes on c2 with check. So queen d3 doesn't look good. I don't want to face knight b4. So queen d2, my knight still holds e4. There's also f3 as a possible move. f3 supports e4 and allows my knight on c3 to move to d5 with tempo. There's also knight takes c6 as a possible move. Don't really like that. I don't like castling into that G file. I think maybe queen d2. It's a safe move, prepares castling, queenside. If queen d2 and castle queenside, there may be h5 and bishop h6, hitting the queen on d2 and the king on c1. Then there may be f4 in response, though. Okay, what is black trying to do here? Black probably wants to castle queenside as well. Maybe black can play bishop e6 next move. And if I take, he straightens out his pawn trouble. And he castles queenside. Castling kingside seems fastest to me to deal with my e4 pawn and to develop, but it's just too dangerous. Okay, so I'm going to play queen d2. It looks safe. Doesn't look like he has any killer moves. I'm going to rely on f4 to protect me along this C1 H6 diagonal. Okay, I have to recapture, I believe. There's no good Zwischenzugs, so we're going to recapture. Okay. So I have the healthier pawn structure. He has the bishop pair. I have more space, better development. His dark squared bishop still needs to get an open diagonal, which is why I don't want to take the queen. Queen takes e5, d takes e5, opens up a dark squared diagonal and helps his pawns a little bit. So I'm tempted to castle queenside in order to protect my queen. It's a useful developing move. So if castles queenside, there is queen g5 check, forking the king and the g2 pawn. And then king b1, queen takes g2. But then there is queen takes f6, which does protect f2. The rooks are protecting each other. The h2 pawn is protected. And that is also a threat on the f7 square. So castles queenside. It's two checks. Queen g5 check. King b1. Queen takes g2. Queen takes f6. I think I'm okay with that. Castles queenside, queen f4 check. King b1, king is safer and he's not threatening a pawn from f4. So I think I'm okay with castling queenside. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, trades. I have no useful Zwischenzug, so I have to take back. Okay, now c6. Strange move. Doesn't help him develop. Threatening b5, expanding a little bit on the queen side. With fewer pieces on the board, expanding with your pawns isn't as effective as it is in the early stages of the opening. Okay. But he can get some extra space. Okay, how do I get my pieces active here? My g2 square is weak. He's going to play rook g8 probably soon. If I play g3, my light squares are weak on the king side. He has a light squared bishop over there. Not too worried about that though. I could play a4 here to prevent b5. He can play bishop e6, getting his bishop into the game. I want to develop my h1 rook to a better place. I want my knight on c3 improved. Yeah, his pawn on c6 does hold back my knight. Yeah, I was threatening knight d5, forking c7 and f6, so that's a pretty good move for that purpose. So where would my knight like to be? I'd like to be on f5. Maybe force him to trade his bishop for my knight so he doesn't have the bishop pair anymore. So I can play knight e2. Knight e2 then heads to the g3 square, which would blunt an attack down the g file and threaten to go to f5. I don't know what file my h1 rook should go to right now. I might leave it there for the moment. So maybe knight e2 here. And then if b5, I can play bishop b3. And if a5, I can push my a pawn and get a square for the bishop. I like knight e2 heading for g3. I'm going to play that. Playing a little slow. I need to catch up in time here. Okay, challenges my bishop. So I can get rid of his bishop pair, but that fixes his pawns and it takes away my outpost on f5. So I don't think I want to take on e6. So possible moves here are just knight g3, my bishop is protected. And I could move the bishop. I don't want to move bishop d3 and trap my rook. My rook needs to retreat back down the d file, potentially. So from g3, the knight could go to f5 or even h5. I could play bishop b3 here. There's no reason to waste a move if the bishop is already protected. So I'm going to follow through with knight g3, I think. I hope it's safe. Always check to see if your moves are safe. Ah, no, there is a threat. c5. He's threatening c5, hitting the rook, and then when the rook moves, he'll take the bishop on c4. So I have to watch out for that. So I might have to waste a tempo here with bishop b3. Well, no, there is, if knight g3, c5, there is bishop b5 check. And then I can save the rook. So knight g3, I think, is okay. And if bishop takes c4, rook takes c4, b5, rook back to d4, c5, rook d1. Yeah, I like knight g3. I think it's safe. Okay, he hits my rook, so my plan was bishop b5 check. I think it's forced. If I move the rook away, he wins the bishop. I don't want to lose the exchange. So I'm going to call check. Okay, he moves the king. So I'm thinking of moving the rook all the way back to d1. I could keep it on d3 and the possibility of mobilizing it along the third rank. I like my rooks connected. It seems a little, I don't have a plan with it on the third rank. It seems safer on D1. If bishop G4, there's always F3. Okay, I'm going to put it back on D1. Not going to waste too much time on that move. Okay, so rook G8. I have the knight there nicely to protect that. But that does stop me from putting the knight on H5 or F5. So I could play a passive move, rook H-G1, to release my knight. If knight H5, rook takes G2, knight takes F6. His rook is very active. Rook takes F2. I don't like it. His pawn on D6 is pinned. His bishop on F8 is still out of the game. He cannot advance his d-pawn. He can play A6 soon and drive my bishop back. Maybe you can fall back to E2. I want my knight mobile, especially with the H-pawn coming down the board. It might get to H4 and kick it. I can play H4 myself. All right, I'm going to play a very passive looking move here. Hopefully it's temporary. Rook H-G1. It looks safe. Okay, it's a smart move. King C7 gets his rook active on A8. Gotta get your kings into the game in the endgame. He supports his D6 pawn and gets out of that pin. Okay, so now I'm tempted to play knight F5. I don't think knight H5 does much. You can easily protect F6. Although the knight from H5 could go to F4 and attack his light square bishop, and then even to D5, now that there's a nice outpost on D5, that's a possibility. Okay, so I have to decide on putting the knight on F5 or H5. My bishop on B5 still seems safe. I can always retreat it all the way back to E2. I don't see any other candidate moves. Okay, so knight F5, bishop takes F5, E takes F5. I have a weak pawn on F5. He can play rook to G5 perhaps, then G4. I have the E file would open up. Get rid of the bishop pair. It's a hard decision for me. I like knight H5 heading for F4. Okay, I have to look at bishop takes A2, but then there's B3, trapping the bishop. Okay, I think my time's getting really low. I'm going to play knight H5. Okay, even if I run out of time, this is just good practice for calculating and playing slower chess, getting away from blitz for a while. Okay, so now knight F4. So with his bishop on E7, he might want to push his pawn to F5. I could play bishop D3 here to prevent F5. That bishop's going to be driven back anyway, potentially. You can't really stop me from getting my knight to f4, so I'm thinking of bishop d3 to prevent f5. f5 would open up the position for his bishops and activate his dark squared bishop. Then again, knight f4 does immediately threaten the bishop pair. So knight f4, f5, I could either play knight d5 check or knight takes e6. Okay, really low on time. I'm going to play knight f4, try to win the bishop pair. Okay, he does play f5. So knight takes e6, f takes e6, e takes f5, e takes f5. He has an isolated pawn. I can push g3 and then get a rook to e1. I can play knight d5 check. I'm going to take the bishop off the board, expecting him to recapture. And then e takes f5. I'm in blitz mode now. Okay, he does have bishop to g5 check. King b1, I'm not worried about that. Okay, it looks safe. Just want to make sure my moves are safe now. I want to push g3 soon. That's an interesting move. He doesn't want an isolated pawn. I could push g4, g4, e takes f5, e takes f5, no good. If I play f takes e6, rook takes f2, his rooks are very active. Bishop to g5 is coming, there's a threat on g2. I think I'm just going to give up that pawn and push g3 and then f4. Okay, there's a threat on f2, so I'm going to push f4. I want to stay over a minute on the clock. Okay, got to protect h2. Can move a rook to the second rank. Okay, let's do it. All right. Okay, I can't play bishop e2 without dropping the h2 pawn. So maybe I should have played the other rook to the second rank. So I'm going to play bishop d3. I'm going to try to play 20 seconds per move here. I could play h4 here and almost trap his rook. Yeah, I'm going to go for h4. g3 is protected. Ah, no, he's got a pin on the pawn. Oh, he could have taken on h4. But now I can play rook g2. The rooks are protecting each other. Okay, have to watch out for back rank weaknesses. I did not see that. Okay. All right, I think I'm going to lose this game. I'm going to pin. I'll play king d1. Okay, I'll play it out. He's up in exchange. His rook is almost trapped here. He has this square. Okay, I'm going to try to get that square from him. Could play bishop to e4. Try not to draw arrows. Bishop e4 looks promising. It protects my rook. Yeah, he still had rook takes h4. Why is he not taking on h4? There's a pin. So bishop to e4 looks good because it takes away the d5 square. It keeps an eye on the f5 square, protects the rook on g2, and it threatens bishop to f3, winning the exchange back. He can play, after bishop e4, he can play d5, but then bishop f3 anyway. Now, after I play bishop f3, he has rook to f5, so it's not a threat to win the exchange. Okay. I'd like to push g4, but he has rook takes h4. Maybe I should get the king into play here. Okay, running out of time. All right, so not a good game. I think time pressure got the best of me. I can get a passed pawn, f5. Okay, let's do that. He does have d5. No, bishop takes d5 hits the rook. Okay, now he's threatening d5. Oh, I can win the exchange back, but at the cost of a pawn. Okay, let's go for that. He has to play rook takes f5 and then bishop g4 pins the rook. Okay. Or maybe I just... Well, I can play king e4 and then d5 check and king takes d5. I don't have to take the rook right away. I can play rook f2. Ooh, rook f2. Did he blow this? Finally, he's showing his rating, 2000. He was playing quite well for a 2000. Rook f2. Can't move the rook. Gonna win a whole rook. I'll be up a piece for a pawn. Okay, let's go for that. All right, it's nice they give you a chance. He does have a wall of pawns. So do I want to trade rooks? I think so. Have less pieces to blunder, as Ben Feingold always says, fewer pieces to blunder. Okay. All right, so I think this is going to force to trade rooks. Should be able to get a passed pawn now on the king side. Got a 2-on-1 majority. Yeah, and his king is running away from this majority. That's not a good idea. Okay, we'll push it. It's running further away. Okay, so he was winning. He's just throwing this game away. It's making it really easy on me. I think it was 1 anyway at that point once he dropped his rook. Okay, so this should be an easy finish. There's nothing his pawns can do. I'll try to play it quickly. This is getting a little boring now. They do have d3 covered. It's just queen. Okay, let's just push. I'll take d3 with my king if he pushes his pawn. So, or my queen can stop whatever. Let's checkmate him efficiently. Keep him to the top 2 ranks. Let's get the king in. Let's put him in a little box. Okay, mate in 3, that's 1. Two, and 3. Okay, so just a quick look at a couple of key moments in the game. I'll request a computer analysis. Okay, so level 5 is beatable. I know a 2000 rated human is beatable for me, but I'm more afraid of a 2000 rated computer for some reason. I don't know why. I think it can play better than a 2000 rated human. Obviously not, that's what a rating is, but it's just a different way they play. Okay, so yeah, there was a big blunder here. Went from winning to losing. Look at this dip. Okay, so I blundered it away and he blundered it back. Okay. Let's go back to the beginning, put the opening book on. So I had 4 inaccuracies, 1 mistake, 2 blunders, 26 average centipawn loss. He had 9 inaccuracies, 0 mistakes, 2 blunders, 47 centipawn loss. So overall, it looks like I played better. Although I did have some bad blunders. So e takes d4, here's the most popular move. Knight f6 is the second most popular. That's what he played. Sometimes in this position I see knight d7. But yeah, knight f6 is forcing. Knight c3 is the response most people play to protect e4. Now that is a rare move. Almost everybody plays knight b d7, and a few people play e takes d4. 6 people in the database have played queen e7. What does the engine think about that move? So it went from plus 0.4 to plus 0.9, so the engine doesn't like that. Let's see, how do I take advantage of it though? So it's suggesting bishop e3 or bishop e2. Those look weird to me. I play bishop c4. c6 is the recommendation there. That's the kind of plan that you see a lot in the Phildor or the Peart's opening. Get this b5 move in. Okay, I do have an opening advantage here. Taking was good. Queen d2 is an inaccuracy. Suggests pinning the knight and bishop d7. And then just castles. Yeah, okay. Let's continue. So it's about even here. So castles along was a mistake. doesn't want me to trade queens. It wants me to move the queen, something I didn't really consider. I considered defending it or exchanging it. It just seems like a wasted tempo to move it. But I do have much better pawns and space and development, so that does make sense. And I can play f4 here and get even more space. Yeah, I like queen e3 followed by f4. It suggests c6 and castles. What about f4? It's okay. He has this move. All right, something to think about. I had a slight advantage throughout all of this part of the game. Yeah, it suggests the other rook here. When I played that rook, I can't put the bishop back on e2. Ooh, so h4 was a big mistake. Yeah, this rook is loose. I have to think about my loose pieces. Let me turn the engine off. What if he just played here? Just winning a pawn. Or here. Winning a pawn, and no, that just allows me to pin the bishop and win the bishop. Okay, so he played bishop d4. Yeah, that was a good move because it attacks the rook and it threatens to go here at the same time. And I can't drop that pawn, so I'd have to move the rook over here to protect against losing the exchange and drop this pawn. So I really played poorly in this section of the game. h4 was too weakening. I have to watch out for the loose rook. I have to be thinking about loose pieces. Pins. I have to think about what he wants to do. That's a plan right there to consider. Okay. But then, after I was completely losing, he makes this blunder. Okay, and that allowed me to play f5, and his rook on h5 is now trapped. It can't move. And then, yes, you just win the rook in the game. All right. Well, I learned something. I hope you did too. Thanks for watching my chess notebook.